Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the top 4 most common mistakes in backhand technique. So I've been coaching in the area for a little bit now, and I figured I'd make this video because I noticed that the 4 mistakes that I'm going to be talking about today are pretty common and are found in most of the people I work with. So I figured I'd make this video because they're probably found in most people's form. So I might as well break it down for you so you can improve your technique, throw a little bit further, and reach your goals. So let me get straight into it. So the first mistake I notice in most people's form is when they link their hips and their torso in their backswing. So typically after the first 2 steps in their X step, I notice that most people will link their lower body and upper body and face directly backwards in their backswing, as I'll show you in this video. And typically they link their body, and then when on their final step of their X step, they kind of fully twist their body at the same time. So the problem with this is people heavily rely on their upper body and typically their shoulder to throw the disc then, and don't allow the other mechanics of your body to perform the throw. So if you look at other sports, any sports that revolve throwing, or golf even, if you look at baseball, hockey, or golf, you can see that when a pitcher goes through their throwing motion, they typically activate their hips first, and their torso lags behind, and then their arm lags behind after that. And that creates something called like a whipping effect. And then if you wanted to relate it to specifically disc golf, you could see any disc golfer will typically stagger their hips and their torso in their backswing, and when they pull through, their hips will be leading and everything else will follow. Their upper body will follow, then their arm, and then eventually they'll release the disc. This is the concept of creating a coil, and so it creates like a whip-like effect where your body coils up and then releases that coil smoothly. But if you link your hips and your torso, it kind of creates like your body's kind of like a stick, and it's only relying on your upper body to throw. To find out what causes this, typically on the second step of your X step, your left foot, if you're right-handed, or your right foot if you're left-handed, will point backwards away from the target and cause your hips to face backwards, and naturally your torso will face that way as well. That's typically what causes this problem. And to solve it, you really want to focus on keeping your feet perpendicular to the tee pad of where you're throwing. So instead of having your foot face backwards, you'll have it face perpendicular to the tee pad and keep your hips facing forward. And now I'm not going to say that your hips have to be perfectly perpendicular to the tee pad and your torso be facing this way, because that's very difficult, puts a lot of strain on your body. But what you need to focus on is really trying to just stagger your hips and torso just even a little bit if possible, so that your body can coil and create this whip-like effect when you pull through by leading with your hips and then having your torso follow through. Some drills you can do is practice just your X step, where you kind of just do cross steps in a line, so that you kind of get the practice keeping your feet and toes perpendicular to the tee pad. All right, getting into the second most common backhand mistake I see in players is when you lean backwards. So in a disc golf throw, there are 3 axes. So there's different areas your body can rotate or move to during your swing. So I like to call it, there's the upper body can rotate from left to right like this on the y-axis. Your body can sway left to right on x-axis, or kind of move off of the y-axis and kind of just move side to side. And then your body can obviously move forward and backward on a z-axis. So your body can naturally move all these ways, but I would say you want to limit moving your body from off of the y-axis that it's naturally on. You can move it front and back as long as you keep it in this position. However, if you ever lean backwards away from your target like this on your reach back, your body has to overcorrect, and it can create a lot of wobble, and loss of arm speed, where your body has to move from this off-axis position back to neutral, then while pulling the disc forward, and you typically don't want that. If you look at any professional player, you can see that everybody's form is unique. However, one thing you could find in all distance throwers is that typically whatever Z-axis they're on, leaning forward, straight up and down, they'll hold that same exact form all throughout their swing. So if you look at Luke Taylor, recently did really well at this year's World Championships. He's very explosive from up and down, in very upright position. And if you look at other players like Gannon Burr or Nicolas Antila, they lean forward a lot, but they stay on that same axis without leaning from left to right. To correct this, you really just want to focus on just staying in that same position and just opening your shoulders backwards instead of leaning backwards, reaching back with the disc. You want to really just open your shoulders backwards and then return to the same position, whether you're leaning forward or leaning backwards. Moving on to mistake number 3. I can make a whole video about this, but it's rounding. First of all, I'm going to talk about rounding. Rounding is when during your swing, your upper body and lower body are ahead of the disc, and that causes your disc to lag behind your shoulder throughout your throw, and then you kind of keep your arm and elbow and shoulder are never really activating, and so you kind of throw in a semicircular movement. This causes you to not only, even if you're doing everything else right, you could put a lot of strain on your shoulder and your elbow because it's lagging behind and your shoulder is stretching so much because it's behind your trailing shoulder. You not only lose a lot of distance, but it can cause some serious pain. So, and I'm speaking from experience myself. I used to round a lot the first 6 months I played, and it took me a long time to correct it. But to fix rounding, step 1, you want to just be standing straight up and down, and you want a disc in your hands. It could be any disc, and with that disc, you want to point 45 degrees. If you're pretending like you're throwing to the right for your right-handed, or to the left if you're left-handed, you want to just focus on bringing the disc backwards 45-ish degrees to your left chest into like this power pocket, which is where your disc should be, and then 45 degrees out in front of you. You kind of want to practice this motion to where you can get it pretty quickly and it feels rather comfortable. And you're not twisting your torso, you're not adding any other movements, it's just you simply moving the disc from 45 degrees behind you to the power pocket 45 degrees in front of you. Moving on to step 2, when you feel like you're pretty comfortable with that, you could start twisting your torso backwards, not even worrying about your hips so much, but twisting your torso backwards and then rotating forward as well. As long as you feel comfortable with putting the disc in the right area, that's the key. And you kind of have to break the previous muscle memory you have of rounding, where your disc is trailing, to where your disc is now moving in line with your body. And so that's step number 2. You can twist your torso backwards and forward and just rotate 45 degrees behind you to your power pocket, 45 degrees in front of you while rotating your torso. And keep in mind, I didn't really throw a disc for a couple of days. I kind of just tried to get this movement down so I would stop rounding, and it took me a lot of reps, but I just practiced a lot and it helped me get better. But step 3, you could focus on twisting your hips now a little bit and kind of getting in a more athletic stance to where you're bending your knees, you're twisting back, and you're kind of trying to mimic the exact steps that you've already worked on. And once you feel comfortable with that, you can actually start throwing in the field. I personally recommend throwing discs that are neutral to slightly understable so that you can kind of get a good understanding of how the disc is flying based off your throw. So if you throw it flat with a putter, a neutral putter, it should go relatively straight. It's not like you're letting the disc do the talking, you're kind of letting your own throw determine how the disc is going to fly. So with those 3 to 4 steps, you should be able to correct your rounding and just breaking your previous muscle memory. As long as you're correcting your timing where your arm is moving in synchrony with your upper body, it should correct your rounding. And you have to probably take lots of videos of yourself to see, and it's going to take a lot of effort to correct this, but in the long run it's all worth it because not only is you're going to prevent yourself from hurting yourself, but you're also going to throw much further. I can move on to the last step now, and the last step is nose angle. So that is 100% the most common thing I notice in players that I coach. I've seen plenty of phenomenal players that throw really far that also have a positive nose angle, and it really kills your distance. I'll break down what nose angle really is. So there's 3 different angles you could put on a disc: nose angle, launch angle, and hyzer angle. So hyzer angle, if you're looking at a disc like this, is how much a disc is released like this or like this. So for righties, this is anhyzer, this is flat, this is hyzer. For lefties, the exact opposite: hyzer, flat, anhyzer. Launch angle is basically how high or how low you throw it, and nose angle is how much angle the disc is coming out of your hand. The nose is the point of the disc that's furthest away from you in your typical backhand form, and if it's pointing down, you're throwing nose down, and if it's pointing up, it's nose up. Flat is flat. But what I notice in most of the people I coach, I luckily use a tech disc in a lot of my lessons, but I can kind of see that most people are nose up when they throw. And this is a negative aspect of your throw, because your disc is, the nose of your disc is immediately exposing itself to the air in front of it or wind in front of it, and it causes your disc to rise and slow down much quicker than if it were to be nose down. If it's nose down, your disc wants to fight the wind briefly before it levels out and slows down and eventually finishes its flight. And so what I notice is, even with players that throw 500 plus feet, they're throwing into a lot of headwind, and their throws actually slow. They come out super fast and they slow down quite often because their nose angle is so positive that the disc actually, they throw significantly shorter, 100 to 150 feet shorter than what they could throw based on their arm speed and their technique. This isn't like a beginner or just intermediate problem. Advanced players struggle with this as well, but typically you want a negative nose angle. Typically what causes a positive nose angle is your grip. If you're just typically holding a disc out with your regular backhand form, I want you to hold it out in front of you, and if you feel like you can't tilt the disc down to where it's facing downward without it straining this part of your forearm and wrist, that means your grip is most likely wrong. And so there's 2 ways to fix it. Number 1, either you loosen your pointer finger to where it's kind of just a little bit looser, and you could, the more you loosen it, the more you could point the disc downward, typically, or you kind of put the disc into the fattier part of where your thumb and palm is. The palm is by your thumb, and it would be a lot easier to point the nose downward. However, if you move the disc downward to more into the center of your palm, you can see that it's a lot harder for me to point the nose down. I'm actually straining my arm pretty heavily right now. So if you push it up to where it's into the fattier part of your thumb and your palm, it's a lot easier to point it downward. And so that's probably the number 1 tip to fixing nose angle. When I first started learning, I would kind of just point my disc pretty flat to a little bit negative, not to where it's straining my arm, but it's just activated. And I would try to keep it the same way throughout my whole form, and it's really helped me learn how to throw nose down. If you feel like you're doing everything else right, you're like, man, my form is perfect, I'm leading with the hips, I'm not leaning from side to side, I don't know, you feel like your form looks exactly the same as your favorite pro, and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, it could be your nose angle. And so you can either get it checked by using a tech disc at your local store, or you could just test your grip yourself and kind of see that if you can't flex your disc beyond flat, then your grip is probably wrong. You need to bring the disc into the fattier part of your palm and flex it downward so that you have a negative nose angle and can point the disc downward while you throw. So that kind of concludes my video, honestly. I hope you guys found this pretty useful. I feel like these were pretty common mistakes that a lot of disc golfers out there, whether they're beginner all the way to advanced, kind of struggle with. If you guys have any questions, just put them in the comments below. I'm also open to making other videos, like if I didn't explain one of these concepts in depth enough, or you want another video describing in depth how you could really break down each of the ways to improve your backhand throw, I'll gladly make a video on it. If you want other tips and tricks on how to throw a little bit further, I'll gladly make another video as well. But besides that, I really appreciate it if you're still watching this video. It really means a lot to me. It's been a pretty good month of making videos, but yeah, if you guys want to support me, I do own a disc golf shop in Santa Cruz called Disc Zone. You can check it out online or in store. I'll be in most of the days of the week. We're open 7 days a week, so you'll pretty good chance you'll find me in the store. But besides that, thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.